welcome back to our show. You know, Mike, we have come across many unique individuals with, they sometimes think that they're ordinary, but they are very extraordinary in some of the situations that they have had during their lifetime. And it's our pleasure to present one individual that has had many experiences, not only in our lifetime, but paranormal experiences.
Right.
And it's our pleasure today to be able to talk with Stephanie Patel. Stephanie comes from North Dakota. You ever been to North Dakota?
Nope, haven't got out that far north, probably. I've been out as far as Colorado, but not that far north. And there was a movie made in Fargo.
Oh. So is this perhaps an individual that helped to make this movie?
I hope not.
But Stephanie has been sharing some interesting things. Let's see, she's a channeler. She's an author of No Off Buttons. It's a really good book about, she's going to share some things.
Right. And if you want to go to the website, the web address is down under her name. Gotta get my directions right. It's down under the name over there, nooffbuttons.com.
Stephanie, welcome. And thank you for allowing us to share some information about you.
Well, it's my pleasure.
Care to share a little bit about your background and how you became Stephanie Patel, the author?
Well, sure. I'm presently retired. Most of my working career was as an attorney in Alaska. I actually was born in Alaska in a little village in the middle of Alaska. I was born at home. I was the 9th of 15 children, and I spent my early childhood.
9 of 15 children?
Yes.
Wow.
Yep. The year I was in second grade, we had a child in every grade 1 through 8, and a couple in high school, and a couple at home.
Wow.
Gee, I thought my brother and sister were just too many, but 15. Anyway,
And so when I was little, we actually moved to one of the most beautiful places in the world, Homer, Alaska. And it's very scenic there, and it actually was very good for me. But my father died. He was drowned, along with my 11-year-old brother. And my mother brought us back to North Dakota, where she had been raised. And I did my schooling there, finished my schooling, went to school in North Dakota, across the river in Minnesota, and graduated from the University of North Dakota School of Law. I went back to Alaska with my children and lived there until 2 years ago. About October of 2011, I first got the idea of leaving Alaska, so I guess it's been about 5 years when that thought first hit my mind, which kind of was shocking because I thought I would never leave Alaska. And but I, rationalized it, and 4 months later, I had found a house in Fargo, North Dakota, and moved back and forth, went back and forth while I closed down my law practice over the next couple of years, and moved here permanently in July 2014.
So were you looking for more warm weather in balmy North Dakota?
Well, the nice thing about North Dakota is it's got 4 seasons. Alaska, you have 2.
Winter and almost winter, right?
Yeah, snow and no snow. You have no spring because it's just breakup. It just freezes and thaws and freezes and thaws. And in the fall, it rains. It starts raining sometimes on the 4th of July and rains until it snows. So all you get is a week of soggy leaves.
So just out of curiosity, when you started having some extraordinary kinds of events occur, and we'll get into that in a little bit, but was it in Alaska or North Dakota? Were you young or old?
Well, actually, I was raised as a Catholic, and Mass every Sunday, all that, confession every week. But about 10 years, I left that behind, and I was what you would say was agnostic. leaning to atheist even. When I was in law school, as kind of a relief from the law school dynamic, I got involved in the study of karate. And that seemed to bring up some latent ability, that particular study. And I was experiencing some phenomena, a sense of knowing before things would happen, or especially a sense of knowing if anything was going on with my kids from a distance, I would just know. Some materialization kinds of phenomena and at the time it was just kind of interesting. And then actually the day after I took my last final in law school, I had an extremely profound experience. I would describe it as you live all your life in this world that's covered by clouds. And one day you happen to be in this particular spot and the clouds part and you see the sun. And all of a sudden you know what makes the flowers grow, what brings the light. And then the clouds close up again and you can't tell anybody because they haven't experienced it.
Yeah, it's sort of a personal within you.
Right. But it's a universal knowledge that you get to, and you understand that immediately, that this ineffable experience is universal knowledge, and all of a sudden you understand that all those people who, all the religions, the people that they revere, that, as the ones who started their religion, all, as I say it, drank from the same stream. Mm-hmm. And so that, I wasn't even interested in spiritual things. I wasn't interested in paranormal stuff. It was like instant flip of the switch. And what I did experience through that was I understood, and it was almost like a joke to me, it was humorous. It was like, why didn't I see this before, that there is no death? It simply was impossible. That which doesn't exist cannot die. The spirit continues. The material world keeps recycling. And that everything is made of love. Love is light. I understood, it was like the two sides of the main coin were love and beauty. If you see the beauty, you will experience the love. If you experience the love, you will see the beauty. And it was like under that, all the different dichotomies came in, all the duality under this singular type of potential love.
Stephanie, I had a Native American once tell me that those experiences, very few individuals are fortunate to have the level of experience, and he called them MOBs, M-O-B, moments of bliss, and they come in, they just grab you, and then it's like it's very difficult.
They talk about the veil is lifted.
Yeah.
Yep.
And I think it's very good that you had an experience like that.
Very lucky.
Yeah,
because a lot of people would love to see that.
That's right, because there's not a lot of individuals that have touched the depth that you have.
Now, was there anything that sparked that? Were you in a dark place or a happy place when all this happened?
Well, I was in a dark place, but I think it was, like I say, I think my karate training had, just very briefly, what had happened, and I haven't really talked about the circumstances because it involved other people, but I was with it's been so many years now, I was with a friend. I was very dark place, and I wanted to go out and share a beer with her and cry into my beer. And she said, fine, but first I have to visit my paraplegic brother who's in the dorm. And I thought, well, I don't want to do that, but my karate training, I'll call that into play, and I will be present through this. And then after we're done, I can put aside my depression until we're done, and then I can engage in it. She went to knock on the door to his dorm room, and at that moment, I heard the words, everything flows to the good as the rivers flow to the sea. She opened the door, and he had his head down on his desk. He was like 18, and he had been in a car accident the year before or something. He had so many things he'd not been able to experience. He lifted his head, and you could see he'd been crying. And he said, "What do you want?" in kind of a growly voice. And at that moment, I knew when we left, he would be laughing. We walked into this room, and the best way I can explain it is what I was split into three parts. There was what I referred to as the puppet master. I had no other terms for it. The body I referred to as the puppet. Of course, I'm referring to these things in retrospect. And the part that I identified with went into nun space, where it was the observer. It was observing all this, but was not in any location, if that makes any sense. It was totally no physical location.
Sure.
It just knew what was going on. And so the puppet master, as I watched, the puppet master operated the puppet with such incredible perfection. It was like once I was out of it, it just did what it needed to. It did things I would never have done had I been in control, just little silly things. And pretty soon this guy's chuckling, and then he's slapping his leg and laughing, and this went on for about 10 minutes. And then when it was time to go, we come out, we shut the door, and immediately I went back together. But what had happened during that period is it was like I had been downloaded with information. And so I had tons, it was like all this knowledge had been downloaded to me, and all of a sudden I could see things that I just had never understood before. And like I said, it was, to me, I thought of it as being as easy as falling off a log. You know, how come I didn't get this before? It's so obvious. And yet I was then back under the clouds, and all I had was the memory of it. It never ceased to be the seminal experience of my life, the one, and all that knowledge became the foundation of everything that happened to me afterwards. It would be, does it jive with what I learned then? And basically, as we came out, my friend's going, "Wow, I haven't seen him in such a good mood in a while." And I'm thinking, ha, 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 you know. And that, yeah, I just always, my life, thought of it as the most real experience of my life.
Yeah, it sounds like, with astral projection, individuals leave their body, but their 5, 6 senses are attached. Remote viewing is where we can mentally picture leaving the body and going somewhere else. So it sounds like you had a remote viewing astral projection somewhere in the middle, where you touched something that many individuals have not had that opportunity to touch.
Well, one of the benefits was I felt this overpowering sense of love, and I was a very insecure person, and there was just this overpowering sense of love. I could just feel it to the core of me. It's like people describe with their near-death experiences, and I just understood there was this benevolence that this love just seemed to stream from.
That's interesting. In last October, you had a unique experience. Would you like to share?
Sure. Well, after I moved to North Dakota, I actually fell into a period of despondency, kind of depression, and I had just reached the point where I had decided, because throughout my life as an attorney, my family was not open to the spiritual realm, nor were the people with whom I associated. I couldn't even talk about that experience I told you fellows about for 10 years. I think I lost one friend when I tried. And finally, the atmosphere, the environment, the social environment had lightened up, so people were becoming more open to this. And then I could begin to discuss it with other people. So in my life, I always felt like I was pulled between two different worlds. The world in which, my attorney world and, home life in which I lived, and this world that just I loved, but they were so different. and I couldn't figure out how to bring them together. And so I would continue to experience some phenomena, but it wasn't something that I felt I could indulge in because I needed to stay focused in what I was doing. And I was a single parent. I was raising children throughout all this period. So when I moved to North Dakota, when I retired, my goal was to indulge in what I had always wanted to, the spiritual path. And to me, it was never about seeking the phenomena. It was about finding peace, coming to rest. To me, the symbol 0 was very important. Simplicity, refining things down, putting things back together till you come back to the wholeness. To me, 0 represents total potential and wholeness, the beginning without end, no beginning, no end. And so that's where I wanted to go. And in my experience, I had seen the souls come back, reunite with the big soul, if that makes any sense. Maybe you think of it as God, whatever.
Sure.
But I wanted that. I wanted to let go of my ego, to resolve all my issues. I didn't want to come back here. I always felt like it was my last life. A lot of things indicated that it was, from numerology to all other kinds of things. And I wanted to go back. I wanted to reunite with God. That was what I wanted. It's the best way I can say it. So I was in kind of a depressed state because there was nothing in life that mattered. When nothing in life matters, what do you have? When you've let go of all the things that mattered, what's left? And that was my question. When you've let go, when you've realized it's all illusion, what happens then? So one day, I had actually, that summer, I had visited 2 psychic mediums. I thought maybe they can give me some insight. And they both said mid-October something important is going to happen. And I just went, yeah, right. Very logical mind. I've been attorney mind. And so one day on October 14th, I sat down to my computer and I thought, I want to see if I can communicate with somebody on the other side. And it was a lark. I didn't really expect much. I was like, who knows, whatever. I realize now that, thoughts were being planted in my mind. But I had my cup of coffee, I sat down, and the person I wanted to talk to was somebody I knew really nothing about other than a name. And I had heard when he died 4 years before that about his last words. And I had his name, which was Steve Jobs. As I couldn't have picked him out of a picture. As I say, I couldn't have picked him out of a police lineup. I don't know if I even knew that he was associated with Apple. I knew
So this is the Steve Jobs that started and ran Apple, correct?
Apple Macintosh, yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
So anyway, I don't normally watch the news, but when those headlines were all over the place when he died about his last words, I started paying attention because that did interest me. What do people see when they die? What goes on then? And his last words, as reported by his sister, were, "Oh wow, oh wow, oh wow," as he looked past everybody into the distance. And so I thought, well, let me see if I can talk to him.
Well, good.
And so I just put my hands, immediately I started feeling the words, or sensing the words coming through me, and I was typing them up as fast as they came. And what I got was, "Hello, this is Steve Jobs, thanks for hosting me." And then he goes on talking, and I'm typing as fast as I can. And I wasn't really buying it. It's like, how do I know this is you?
Right.
And so I wanted my logical mind was very skeptical mind, wanted validations. And so he came up with some. He said, well, some things that I didn't know about, I have a hairline issue. Is that okay? And then I was like, I don't know what you look like. Then he said, well, maybe you heard about my scar, which I didn't know anything about a scar. And then he said, well, I'll tell you what, you need something you can look up. So the year I was 21 was an important year to me. And maybe you want to pause and look that up. So I got on the internet and I looked it up. And sure enough, I found out that Steve Jobs at age 21 and Steve Wozniak had started Apple Computer in the family garage. So I was like, oh, okay, well, that's some validation. And I was like, he was kind of, his language was kind of casual, and it was kind of like, let's let this shit fly, And so I was kind of like, did you really talk like that? Because I didn't know. And he said, well, I never really listened to myself. I was listening to other people. And then he started talking about the simplicity and zero and the importance of zero to him. And I was like, well, that could be coming out of my subconscious even, because that's me. That's the way I think. And so we kept talking for a while. And then I said, okay, I really hadn't bought this. I said, okay, this was fun, but I'm going to get up and go about my work. And I went upstairs and he went with me. For 40 days and nights, he talked to me constantly. I would describe it as telepathy. When you're talking to something. I didn't know, I looked up the stuff he'd told me before. I couldn't find anything for an information on a scar until I read that he'd had this cancer and that he'd had a liver transplant. Still didn't think that was a big deal. And then I looked at the scars and I'm like, holy moly, that's a scar. And of course he does have a hairline issue. But I still was very doubtful, and he, over time he said I had to keep validating and validating and validating. It was true. I was very skeptical. At one point, after a few days, I said, hey, I had an internet friend that I was telling this story to, and she's buying into it, but I'm not. And finally I said to her, I'm convinced that, I can't be talking to Steve Jobs. And I had noted the synchronicity between our names, Steve and Stephanie. And his response to that was, well, it took you long enough. But he actually was very humorous at many times, kind of a very biting sense of humor, but it matches mine. And so I wrote my friend, I said, I'm not talking to Steve Jobs. I'm convinced whatever this voice is, I don't know. It's kind of fun talking to it, but I just am not going to buy that I'm talking to Steve Jobs. So I felt better. No Steve Jobs. I'm not crazy. I think I was feeling a little crazy. And all of a sudden, he's getting very emphatic. I am Steve Jobs. And not only am I Steve Jobs, and he starts talking to me about other things like Pixar. He said, reminded me of Pixar. And he said, I wasn't an animator, but what I learned there had a lot to do with how I began to see reality, how you could create reality out of these points of light. And then he said, we were once one soul and we pulled apart long ago. Huh. And I'm like, yeah, right. I wasn't buying it, but I was like, interesting, but I'm just not there yet. And he said he'd been trying, it was time to remerge and go back to one. And said some other things. Oh, he said, go get this book, his autobiography that was written by Walter Isaacson. And it has a picture of him on the cover, a full-face picture. And he said, look at the eyes. And I was like, yeah, right. But I went and got the book and I looked at the eyes. And first I didn't see anything. And then I was like, holy crap, that is my father's eyes. And about a month after this began, he would lead me to different things. He would lead me to songs on the internet. For instance, one night he says, you need a lullaby to get to sleep. So he sent me to the computer to look up Highwayman or Highwaymen, and their song Highwayman came up, which is about reincarnation. Things like that. He would come up with songs that he would have me look up at times that were, what I needed to hear. He used songs a lot, actually. It was a big part of our conversation. And eventually, about a month into this, I was directed basically to contact a psychic medium in Fargo who had just started. She was from somewhere else. She had just started her business in Fargo. I got an appointment with her. I went and talked to her. She brought through, just fantastic. She brought through my family, and the details was so amazing. So I said, okay, this is where the rubber hits the road. I am going to set up another appointment. This time I'll ask if she can connect with Steve. So the next time we met, I said I want her to connect with Steve. I didn't give a last name. I gave the month and the date of his birthday, which she needs to get the astrological sign. I did not give a year of birth. And she connected with him right away. gave some initial validations, which had to do with his how he died and stuff. And actually, he apologized to me at that point and something about his life. And I remember at the time I was like, "Why are you apologizing to me? I didn't even know you, you know." But
Just out of curiosity, have you ever tried to communicate in other means, like for instance Ouija boards, or
No.
through some kind of physical? No.
no,
Okay. You know, oftentimes individuals, when they do communicate, I wish I had as strong a communications with persons, etc., on the other side, but we doubt ourselves quite a bit, and I know that one of the individuals mentioned that, Mike, you have a guide named Dave or David,
Yeah, David.
and
I was just being funny, shortening it to Dave.
and so a lot of us are in that same realm where we think we're talking with them. You
Like, am I just hearing this in my
Yeah,
own head?
yeah, but you confirmed it 3 or 4 different ways. Is that correct?
oh, many different ways. At one point, he actually had me lay on the bed, and I had my keys. He made me go get my keys. And he told me where they were, and I didn't even think they were there, but I went and got them, and they were where he told me they were. He'd always help me find lost things, but I got my keys, put them in my pocket. I said, and during the day, I'm like, why do I have my keys? What do you want me to do? I thought maybe he wanted me to go for a drive or something. So finally, he asked me to lay down on the bed, and we were going to work on some astral travel stuff that we were working on. And I had took my sweatshirt off with my keys in the pocket. I know they were in the pocket because I only had one fob, and I set it beside me. And so for about 2 hours, I'm laying there. Well, I don't even know. Maybe they just wanted to keep me on the bed. But him and actually some others on the other side were working on this process, and I could hear him saying, "We're not going to give up. We're not going to give up. We're going to keep going till we do this." And what he told me before I laid down is, he said, "The task of today is to get the keys from your pocket in my bedroom down by the front door downstairs by the door." And I was like, okay. So I'm laying there for 2 hours, and finally my granddaughter comes to the door, and she says, "Grandma, it's time to go take me to swimming." So I say, okay. So I get up, I pick up my sweatshirt, I reach in the pocket, and the keys are not there.
Huh.
It's like,
Interesting.
oh. I went downstairs, and there they were, exactly where he said they would be. And so, there was some other phenomena that happened, and a lot of things to convince me. We have the same hands. We have the same shape of our fingers. I had been keyed into this somewhere that people who are twin souls have the same hands. So I found some pictures of his hands, and I compared my fingers, and I went, holy moly, we have almost identical fingers.
Huh.
His might be just maybe a pinch longer because he had longer bones, but they're the same fingers. Our thumbs are a little different. Mine is the stubborn thumb. His is the flexible thumb. But then I found somebody online who had done a hand reading for Steve, and I sent my hand readings, and I asked him to do a reading of my hand, and he gave me an amazing reading. He was like, your hand is just, so I haven't, I've done thousands and thousands, but I can't even remember seeing a hand like yours. It's so full, and you have all these areas of protection, and you went through all these things in your life, and on and on. And he said, about this time, you should be reconnecting with someone, like a love interest or something, about, this time in your life. And then he said, I don't think that you've had a lifetime. I asked him, I said, do you see any connection, psychic connection or anything with Steve Jobs? That was my only question. And he said, well, I don't think you've had a lifetime. You knew him in this lifetime, but I think you've had many lifetimes together in the past, and that you, he's kind of psychic too, and that you, in this lifetime, that you have a lot of love for him, and that in this lifetime you came in with the desire to help, that you had worked together so many times in the past that, and so anyway, I had that hand reading done. Other things that I would look up For example, I then looked up about several weeks into our relationship. I looked up information about twin souls, and I was like, "Holy moly, this really is a phenomenon. I mean, it really is something that happens." And then,
You mentioned twin souls. Give us a definition of what twin souls are.
okay, all I can tell you is what I've read and what I know from my own experience. So, what I've read is that when the souls were created, in the division of souls, I think of it as like sparks off the anvil. The last division of the soul was into two parts, a masculine and a feminine part. And they separated to gather experience. I think of it as the energy between men and women is both what reminds them of this separation and pulls them back together. And that you share the same resonance because you were once the same soul, identical. That's your closest. That's the soul closest to you in resonance. You actually are the same resonance, which, as it was explained to me, which is what allowed him to get through to me, where others couldn't, and for him to get through to me where he couldn't to others, is that we were that close. So I looked up things like astrological signs, and I'm a Cancer, he's a Pisces. Oh, he has the same birth date as my dad.
Huh.
And they do, and Susie confirmed down the road, the psychic, she's like, he's telling me he has the same eyes as your dad. Why is he telling me that? Things like that.
Interesting.
But I did want to tell you, our astrological signs were so aligned. It was like, this is an ethereal relationship filled with telepathy. Our names Stephanie means crown, like the crown chakra, which telepathy. And so there were so many synchronicities that kept coming. One of probably the most profound was how I came to be named Stephanie. And I don't want to go into that too much other than to say it followed a near-death experience. When I was 20, my name was changed.
Now,
you weren't born Stephanie?
Huh?
You weren't born Stephanie?
No.
Okay.
I was born Dorothy, like Dorothy and the Wizard of Oz.
somehow you just don't look like a Dorothy. You look like a Stephanie.
And another synchronicity, today when we're recording this is the 5th anniversary of Steve Jobs' passing.
That is amazing. Really.
I thought that was kind of cool.
Huh.
It's October 5th, 2016 is when we're recording this.
Wow. I know that you have written a number of different pages in a book. Tell us a little bit about not what's inside the book, but how did the book come about?
Well, from the first time we started talking, he asked me to journal everything.
Oh, okay.
Told me it was going to be a book.
Okay.
And so at that time I was still kind of skeptical, but you know, I started doing it, and I didn't really want to write a book, but I journaled everything that I could, everything. We started taking astral journeys together, and so we were interacting in a very more full sensory way.
Ah, very good.
So we took many astral trips together.
Just something where you go to bed and lay and relax?
Yeah, my favorite position is just laying with my hands on my abdomen. And the first, he would take me. Basically, he'd come and get me, pull me out. I don't have, he showed me how to do it eventually towards the end of the 40 days, but without his energy, it's not that easy for me to do. I can still do it, but not like we did it. And at first they would work on astral projection with me, and it was very concrete, kind of. And then after a while, it became not quite as concrete. It was still very, I was still very much there, and but it was like, I asked him, I said, why is it a little bit more dreamlike? And he said, because we've been working on getting it just right. We want it to be real enough for you to experience it, but if it's too much like your Earth experience, you won't want to come back. And one time he actually showed me, it was like our thing was we would meet when I died, he would meet at the train station.
Huh.
And so one time I went on my own actually, and I went And I came to this road, and it was this beautiful road with all these flowers, and I could see the train station. So I went over to the train station, and I saw Steve, and it was, oh, happy to see you and all of that. And then we got on the train, and he said, but Stephanie, you have to go back. You can't come yet. And so I got off, and I went back to the road, and I thought, I'm just going to sneak up the road. This cabin where we've met, And I don't think I want ready to go back yet. And my whole family got in the middle of the road. I have 2 kids who passed, parents, etc. My whole family plus Steve got in the middle of the road and said, go back. You can't come. You have to go back. You still have work to do.
If I can just sort of add something a little bit, Mike, I had a wise lady once tell me that, sometimes when we ask to project, individuals will say, well, you're just, you are dreaming.
Mm-hmm.
And had a wise lady, and maybe you can share with this, but when we do astral project, etc., how do we really know we're projecting out? And the wise lady said, find a light switch and try to turn it off. And if something happens, then you're dreaming. Or maybe you're not dreaming. But, that's one of those tests. What kind of tests or what kind of things have you done to sort of help you understand what it's like to astral project? Because I've tried to do that for years and years and years, and I've just not had any luck.
I don't know, because like I said, he would come and get me, and sometimes it would just grab me and we'd take off flying. But there was always a theme in some instances, and it was playful a lot of the time. And we were actually interacting with other souls, like Robin Williams at one point, and Eric Medhus from Channeling Eric, and my family at times. And my family through Susie, they're like, in one of our early sessions, I didn't know this, but my mother and my father are saying, Stephanie, we've seen you flit in and out. And I'm like, really? You can tell me I'm coming and going? And they said, yes, we could see you coming in and out of this dimension.
Is this your family on the other side?
Yeah, my family on the other side.
Now, just one question. How does Steve look? What do you see?
He looks at various ages to me. And he wants to look about 30 with his black hair and his, in fact, he's a little bit vain of his black hair. But like Susie said, when she first saw him, he appeared to her as a thin older man with glasses. And when she didn't recognize him, he was like, come on, And she asked me for his name because she didn't recognize him, like, you're supposed to recognize me. And then she said, she then subsequently saw him as younger, about 30. I showed her a picture once of him when she was about 30, and she said, yeah, that's him. 30, handsome, dark hair.
Well,
wearing anything in particular?
Well, we played with that. I hate to say that, but I hate those black pullovers. So one day he's wearing the black pullover because you can do anything you want in the astral plane, right? So he's wearing the black pullover and the blue jeans, and I'm going to change it. He has what I call the happy shirt, the blue plaid shirt. The only video I've ever seen him where he's happy. And so I think of the black pullover as he went into mourning at some point in his life. To me, I'm like, what were you mourning? But he, and so I'm going whap and changing the black pullover into his blue shirt, and he's going whap and changing it back. And we're doing it so fast, pretty soon I'm putting him in the black pullover and he's putting him in his blue shirt. But, so I prefer that he wear a white shirt, which he does. And I don't mind the blue jeans, but I just don't like that black pullover.
I understand.
He was one of those guys that, so busy, I don't want to have to decide what to wear every day. So he bought the same thing.
Right.
Just wore the same thing every day. So it was no decisions, no time out of the day taken to figure out what do I want to wear today.
Huh. That's rather interesting. I know that you were speaking a little bit about your drawings and the facial features, and the colors, different things of that nature. It's my understanding you're a pretty good artist. and someone that can sit down and sketch the looks of another individual. Am I not correct?
Well, I can say this, I've always been able to draw portraits, and that's only been my only interest, really. But before I connected with Steve here, I would say September of last year, I was in kind of a kick where before I went to sleep, I would have some typing paper and a pencil, and I would just draw these pictures of people, heads. In fact, I have a few I can show you. But I would just draw these heads of people. I had no idea why I was drawing them.
Okay.
Women,
Yeah, you have to hold it in the center.
Yeah, hold it right in the center.
That's good.
Okay.
I had no idea why I was drawing these.
Yeah, move it closer,
No,
please.
that's okay.
Oh, okay. All right.
A little bit more to the center.
Okay, got it?
That's good. Great.
Okay, here's another.
Huh.
Anyway, I'm drawing these portraits. This one, I know who this is now. I know
Okay.
who some of these are now, but at the time, I had no idea why I'm drawing them. I would just get the feeling that I needed to make the chin a little more pointed, the ears a little whatever. And so I would erase, make it the way that I was feeling I needed to, but I didn't know who they were. Eventually, I was led to understand that these are portraits of people that I knew in prior lifetimes. This little fellow, apparently Robin Williams and I had a lifetime in Russia when we all were children and died in a fire, and this was one of our siblings. This was my mother when I was a slave in
Thomas Jefferson's time?
Yep, Thomas Jefferson's slave. This was a picture of me when I was a little boy in the 19th century. Steve was my father. I died when I was about 11. In fact, that became a big impetus in this lifetime that nobody would ever take advantage of him again, because he worked for a banker who utilized his skills. He said we were always, both of us, intelligent, and they would utilize his skills, and he didn't get paid for it. And so they didn't have a very good house. He didn't have money for a doctor. His only child died.
Okay.
And oftentimes our lifetimes become impetus to us to make sure it never happens again.
So how did you come to, after you draw a picture, how do you come to figure out who those people were?
Well, okay. I don't want to put too much on the audience, but over the time, my main connection was with Steve, but he would bring in other people as needed, and some of them were famous. And John and June Cash were two people that he brought through because they are twin souls, and they had connected in the physical, but are together in the afterlife. And so that was one reason they were there. But they saw the pictures and they told me, they didn't tell me, I asked them if they knew who they were, and they said, well, we think we recognize these people, we'll get back to you. So apparently I had a lifetime with John and June Cash when we were all siblings somewhere in Virginia or something, and must have been like the 18th century or something. This was a picture of me in that lifetime. Apparently,
You look really happy.
yeah, apparently I was psychic in that lifetime, and it was very threatening because it was a very Christian type.
Right. Well, not until recently could you really talk about that kind of stuff either.
So I was terrified. But anyway, so they told me, and then through Susie, she looked at them, and she said, started telling me about these people. And then I started making connections on my own. This is about the time I started having past life memories, which was, about 6-7 weeks into our relationship before I started having these past life memories. And then I would start connecting with the pictures.
Now, were you in a very relaxed state to remember these things, or was it just normal life and flash?
Yeah, I think it's kind of like you have any kind of memory.
I wasn't sure if you were trying to regress yourself to.
No.
No.
It would just come to me.
How about future?
And it was all synchronized somehow. So it was all being sort of controlled. as I'm writing this book and journaling. So it would be synchronized so that sort of the right stuff would come in at the right time. I would have the right memories. I started having memories, and it would happen maybe when I was relaxed, maybe before I fell asleep or something, but it could happen any time of the day. I'm doing dishes, driving. And I had recollected a lifetime that I had with Steve, primitive times on an island. He was a primitive king, basically, which was a very, very significant life for us because it was when we separated, basically, emotionally. I was actually his wife and walked away from him.
Huh.
But it was the power. His head was just being turned towards power, and I didn't want to go that way. And so I walked away, and I walked down the beach, and I found a little village, and I found a husband there and lived. But the next session, Susie all of a sudden is talking about the same stuff I've just remembered. So it's all kind of synchronized, and little by little, then I would have talks with Steve afterwards, and different parts of that story would come out. He'd say, Stephanie, you broke my heart in that lifetime, and he'd say, I sent people out to look for you, and then it'd come through Susie, and so all these pieces are sort of coming together from different perspectives and adding to it. And sometimes the pictures would be part of it.
Who's Susie?
What?
Who is Susie?
Right.
Oh, Susie is the psychic medium to whom I was led. And we would spend about 2 hours. She was so amazing. We would spend about 2 hours a week together. And after the first 2 sessions, I recorded them all. And so it was my family, it was guides, it was others. Steve sent in Robin Williams at some point, about halfway through the book, actually, to cheer me up.
So the book is a lot of. It talks about many of those different experiences that you have had and the individuals that you've met on the other side. Is that correct?
Well, it's the first 40 days and nights.
Okay. All right.
And I did not. That was another synchronicity. I didn't know it was significant. So it was basically my relationship, and as people have told me, although it's interesting what happened to you, but the real story for us is your story of how you were dealing with all this. So it's a lot, it just our journals. I include in there some transcripts. I included in there some validations, such as the hand reading. I included in there some information about actually my intelligence level, because Steve and I have the same intelligence level, pictures of the hands, other validation kinds of things. But the story is really the story about how we connected. And of course, there are things that Steve wants people to know. As he says, he didn't get it till his deathbed. He apparently at his deathbed, he got, which fortunately I'd already gotten when I was 28. So we're on the same plane now. And he says that's what enabled him, when he got to the other side, to hit the ground running.
Okay.
And when he got there, he was met by these people who told him, he remembered me, he remembered that he had to wake me up. And that although this book is about our connection, it's really about helping others.
I think that's so important, Stephanie, in the fact that many individuals have unique experiences, and society has taught us, that's an illusion. And I think this book, what do you
doesn't
think,
fit
Mike?
into the fairy tale of whatever religion people prescribe to.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that you can help individuals when they do experience those things, they're not insane, or they're not socially unfit, and so it's a very positive book that you've written.
Now, when I say fairy tale, I'm not like trying to disparage religions, but some of the stories
Sure.
have that
Yeah.
type of thing to
Yeah.
it.
You know, we that have been
Because
brought
there's
up
truth in all the books.
Yeah.
I did want to say this, I mean, there's many things that Steve said during his lifetime that were very intuitive. But one of the things, quotes I just came across from him the other day was, and was, as I was struggling for the courage to come out and say these kinds of things, was that if you want to know what's going to happen in 5 years, you don't look at the mainstream, you look at the fringe.
That's true. That is true.
But which fringe are we going to look at? There's all kinds of people.
That's true. That's true.
But yeah, you do bring up some points. I'm just curious if you ever ran across individuals from your future rather than many from the past.
No, and as far as the future goes, my understanding, along with Steve's, is sort of like, what future are you talking about? There is a million variations of everything. And as Steve would say, I'd keep asking him, are you real?
Sure.
Are you real? And he'd say, yes, I am real. I am real. He said, and I said, well, is all this story and everything that's happening real? He said, everything is imagination, Stephanie. Everything is imagination. And you can imagine whatever you want. You can imagine a happy story. You can imagine a sad story.
That is true.
This is how we create our reality. He said, and where you live, where you are, it's your physical reality that seems so concrete you can't walk through it. And words seem meaningless almost. You just spout out words as you want and think about it. So where I am, the physical reality is nothing but a mist that you can walk through. What's so important is the words, the thoughts that you have, because this is as he explained it, I see them sort of like letter blocks, like little kids play with. You put them in a certain order, and this is the bridge, and this is the building. You're creating with your words.
So these experiences and all the time that you've spent talking to Steve, how has that changed you, and how do you live differently now than you did in the past?
I am profoundly changed. As I said, I was very depressed, and it took me a while for him to pull me back. But and I had many lessons, not just with Steve, but other teachers came through, and it was like lesson after lesson after lesson after lesson, and they were all lessons in love and forgiveness. And a year ago, I would never have had the courage to sit here. It's sort of like in a way, people have asked me, what do you mean? You're an attorney, you talked in front of people. But this is like breaking rank. This is like going to the other side. This is like selling out the material world for the spiritual, if you will. Mm-hmm. And I don't think of it as, people are afraid of the spiritual world. I don't think of it that way. I think of it as stepping outside of them both and saying we can have it all.
You wrote something to Mike and I that we found it very interesting. And that was talking about the new energy that's coming through on the earth. And this is what you said. The key to entering into that new era is to drop value judgment. For example, good, bad, right, and wrong. Want to expand upon that a little bit?
Yes, I will. And it's and again, one perspective on this comes from Steve. We were having a conversation, and we were talking about how messed up the world is and how you change it and what you do. And he said, well, the first thing is, if everybody could stop judging right and wrong, good and bad, the whole world would probably be transformed. And people now use the terms positive and negative as if they mean good and bad. I don't see it that way. Negative, there's polarities to things, and that is the nature of duality. You have polarities. If what you want is to go here and you're going that way, you're going in a negative direction, but that doesn't make it bad. Some people want to go that way because they're going here. So positive and negative by themselves are not good or bad. It's the idea of something is better than something else, that there's some big standard in the sky that says little a little meter that goes good, bad,
Well,
And
that's
so,
what I see is the problem now with politics, within the
Yeah,
United States,
yeah.
the politics of the world,
Yeah.
and the politics of religion. They're bad, we're good. The whole hierarchy of what you think is different than me makes you better than me, or I'm better than you, or all that. And if we could, like you say, let go of that, we could all live together a whole lot easier.
yep. And what it creates for each of us is I'm not good enough.
That is very true.
It's that reaction of I'm flawed, and the self love is the ultimate thing. And so, really, when we're talking about the twin souls, it's your reflection.
That's true.
It's your reflection. Just everybody's your reflection, but this is almost like your perfect reflection. And so, when you love your twin, you love yourself.
Yeah.
Okay, you had another thing here. You don't need a twin, but is there anything you know when you find a twin? I mean, there's a lot of times you probably wouldn't ever meet your twin, but how do you know them when you meet them?
I don't know. Lots of people. There's thousands of people out there. I've been on websites where thousands of people are claiming to meet their twin, and I say, how do you know it's your twin? I know because all the things that we've gone through, and Steve told me to begin with, and I soon saw the synchronicities, the hands, the intelligence level, as he said, and I fought this. I was like, we are so different. I don't even like you. As I read about him, I liked him when I talked to him, but when I read about him, I was like, God, you were a jerk. I don't like you. And he laughed. He thought that was funny. It was like, oh, this makes it even more convincing from my perspective that you thought I'm such a jerk. He said it's like, what was it Paul Harvey used to say, the rest of the story?
Yeah.
It's you,
Sure.
Stephanie. But the polarities, he says, we are the polarities of each other. And so what he told me was he always knew in his lifetime that half of him was missing, but he just couldn't define it. And I sort of felt the same way. And it's like, part of what probably made him a jerk is that half of him, the polarity wasn't quite there.
Not that you would be attracted to a person like that if they were your twin. They don't.
It's totally a soul thing.
Right.
And so I don't know how people know.
Because people talked about, finding their soulmate. I think that's different than what you're talking about, right?
It is. You have many, many, many soulmates. Your twin is the exact other half of you. And as Steve explained it to me recently, it's like the two hemispheres of the brain. He said it's like if something happened and the two hemispheres were surgically severed, each hemisphere starts to take over some of the responsibilities of the others and it learns to get along. If you put them back together and you reconnect them, it can be traumatic, which it was for me. Very traumatic. It was I'm going to say this was a very roller coaster emotional ride. It can be traumatic. And so for me, the neurons are still connecting, the synapses are still connecting, but you have one brain, but you have two hemispheres. So when they're in total communication with each other, you have a wholeness that you could not otherwise have. How do people know that they've met someone who is their twin soul, say they're both in the physical? I honestly don't know. It doesn't matter.
We're getting a little bit short on time, but I would like to have you come back sometime and talk, since you have seen many pictures of past lives. The first question that comes up to me is, have they all been women? And
Well,
I don't think.
Right. Okay.
I don't think you would say no or yes or whatever. I'd like to find out, because if we are a feminine or if we are a male kind of twin flame, that interplays with the sex that we have. It interplays with our hemispheres, and so I think that'll be a good discussion. You know, as to because I think a lot of us have different perspectives of men and women, and I'd like to get more information from you.
I think that's a real interesting topic.
Yes. Stephanie, it is a pleasure. Where can we get your book again?
Oh, do you have
My
it?
book- I do. I actually have a copy here that I can show you if you can see it.
Huh.
And the name of it is No Off Buttons?
No off buttons, the journey begins.
Okay. And how can they get in touch with you, Stephanie?
Well, if you needed to, you could go on No Off Buttons, my website.
Okay,
The book is available.
okay.
The book is available through Amazon, and I might mention that there's a Goodreads giveaway going on where I will give away 10 signed copies here for whoever gets picked.
Okay. All right. All right. Very good. Very good. Stephanie, any last final word that you want to give to
Words
to
of
the
wisdom or
listeners? Yeah,
something?
words of wisdom.
Okay. Words of wisdom. You know, I just got to say this. I could probably tell you some words of wisdom, and those people who are coming for this book and want to just be told what to think, it doesn't work that way. But we did have a little contact with Alan Watts at one point, and I asked him that question. Alan, can you give me any words of wisdom? So Stephanie, I can't give you wise. You have to give you wise. You have to live it. You have to experience it. You have to create it for yourself. And those are the wisest words I think that I've ever heard.
Good words to live by. Stephanie, thank you. We hope to see you very soon, and we'll talk about more in depth about the men, women aspects of the reincarnation.
Yeah, past lives.
Yeah, we'd like to do that. So,
Okay.
Thanks for coming on the show and sharing your experiences and giving people the heads up on the book that's available.
yeah.
All right. Well, thank you guys. It was lots of fun.
Thank you. Mike, I'm Patrick.
I still am Mike.
We thank the listening audience, and we will see you next week.
Right.